What is up, everybody in the LU world, I guess? We are here for episode 8 and 9 recap. Dom and Drew are here. It's been a while since our last week. We covered episode 7, and we are finally, slowly but surely, catching up on Survivor LU. And we are joined with episode 9's boot. Spoiler alert, Lily. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm currently in between work shifts, so it's nice to have a little bit of break.
Well, thank
That's
you for
nice.
taking the time to come out and share your experience with us and everybody who will be tuning in to be watching. I'm sure everybody is anxiously awaiting to hear your story of and your experience of Survivor LU. But Drew, how are we feeling after these two episodes? 8 and 9 were released 3-ish weeks ago. Episode 8 was released. Episode 9 was released
Week before last.
Yep. So we have one episode that we are not fully caught up on yet, but we will be dealing with that later. That's Dom and Drew's tomorrow problem. But today we are focusing on these ones. Drew, what was your just kind of reaction after watching episode 8 and 9?
I was episode 8. I wasn't shocked. Spoiler alert. Delaney goes out in episode 8, and Delaney couldn't be here tonight. She'll be joining us on one of the future recaps that we do for this season. She just had something going on tonight. I wasn't too surprised Delaney went out because the numbers were against them. I was hoping it wouldn't be a straightforward pagonging. And it wasn't, because Lily got idled out. And I think I predicted like 5 or 6 episodes ago that Sophie was going to idle someone out. And nothing against you, Lily, but if you haven't been watching us, I've been a Sophie stan all season long. And so it was good to see Sophie stay in, and that's all I'm going to say. So I was happy Sophie survived. I very, very highly question idling you out, because it seemed like from what the edit showed us, you were contemplating flipping, maybe on a future vote, and we'll get to that when we get to that part. But let's talk a little bit about you getting into Survivor LU. How'd you find out about Survivor LU, and what made you want to apply?
So, let's see. My season was filmed in a spring semester. In the previous fall semester, I had gotten to know Ellie from season 1. We were in our first classes of nursing school together and really gotten close. And she did Survivor that season, which was season 1. And so every week she would come to class, and she knew I was a Survivor fan. So she'd tell me, like, all right, this is what's going on this week. Whether she should have done that or not, I don't know the rules. But either way, she would give me weekly updates.
It's within the rules. That's fair play.
Yeah. And so at the end of her season, she's like, you have to apply next season. I was like, all right. Like, did I think it was going to turn into anything? No. But I was like, all right, I like Survivor. It'll be something to do besides school, because I was so wrapped up in everything nursing. I was like, I need a break. And so I applied, and I did the interview. I was like, there is no way they're going to cast me. Like, this personality ain't all that interesting sometimes. So I was like, I don't think they're going to cast me. And sure enough, they text me like a week later. They're like, all right, you good for this day? And I was like, sure. So it was because of Ellie that I ended up in Survivor. So here we are.
I think
this is also an Ellie. This is an Ellie stan account as well. Sophie is this season what Ellie was last season for me.
So I think that was a kind of a theme going into this season, at least from the production standpoint. I'm sure if Nate was here, he could probably attest to it. We do have a lot of, not necessarily recruits, but a lot of our season 1 cast kind of spread the word and brought people in. Do you think having kind of that connection and like somebody that has been through it before kind of bring you into it? Do you think that maybe prepped you a little bit, or were you just not even expecting, your semester to go the way that it did? Well, of course you couldn't have with COVID and everything, but yeah. Game wise, like, what was Ellie able to prepare you at all for what you went through?
No, because going into it, I was like, all right, this will be fun. Like, we'll do this each week. It'll be a great time. It'll be so much fun. And after the first challenge, I was like, for sure I'm getting voted out. Like, there's no way around that one. I'm going. And then it was like, as we got into it, I was like, I'm starting to care way too much about this game. It's like, this was something of like I was doing for fun. And then I started to meet these people, and I was like, I really care about these people. I really like these people. And with each tribal I went to, which was all of them.
A lot, yeah.
Except one. With each tribal I went to, I was like, this is hard. Like, sending people home, especially people who are big fans of the game. I was like, I feel like a horrible person. And also, it's like lying and like trying to keep track of like, all right, who am I manipulating over here? Who am I telling the truth over here? It as much as I learned about the game from Ellie, it still did not prepare me for what I got myself into.
Yeah, I definitely understand that and very much relate. I'm a Survivor super fan, and I played my first long-term game this summer and was first boot. So I definitely understand that. So talk to us a little bit. You get there, you get on your tribe, you guys have the first challenge, your tribe loses the first challenge. Talk to us about those first couple of weeks and just getting to know your tribe, and building those relationships up through the pre-merge.
Yeah, so I actually loved the tribe that I was on as much as we had a rocky start of going to tribal, and I was kind of immediately on the outs for really what I could think of as no real reason other than the first night they all went to dinner, but I had a test the following day. So I was like, all right, you guys seem great, but I'm not sure that this game is worth sacrificing my grades over for yet.
It is.
Later down the line, I'm like, all right, all bets are off. Like, we're doing this. But at the beginning, I was like, I don't know if we're to that point yet to where I can really sacrifice my grade over these people. And so I had to go study. And so I left. They all went to dinner. And I was on the puzzle portion. So I was like, all right, I think mathematically I'm not going to dinner with all of them. I didn't perform my part of the challenge. That just equals Lily's going home. And really what I was disappointed that they didn't show was how close Hallie and I got. Because we had each other's back like early on and then from each week after that. And we were kind of in it together. And so that was really kind of what got me through each week was our relationship. Because I mean, CK wasn't going to keep me around unless there was really somebody else. I was just kind of like, all right, throw a vote on her. We'll see what happens. I was kind of like his collateral. Like, okay, if we have to send somebody home, I mean, obviously I'm keeping Idris around. Allie's cool, so I'll keep her around. Just when I was like, I would have been the easy like next one. So it was really Hallie's what kept me around those early weeks. But I like the dynamic of our tribe in contrast to the all-girls tribe or the all-guys tribe. So
I think that's a fair assessment. While you guys did go to tribal the most, you guys probably did come out seeming like the closest and that you actually liked each other. Whereas the other tribes, I mean, the girls' tribe was kind of on that edge, but compared to the guys' tribe, you guys seemed very, very close.
Yes.
But I guess this, so you kind of mentioned that you weren't really you weren't CK's biggest fan, if I'm kind of like gauging that. Like, was that something that held throughout the game or something that you've noticed at least as the season has aired? Like, yeah, CK is kind of, had his hands in too many cookie jars, as we've said before in previous podcasts.
Yeah, I definitely felt that way very early on of just I'm very strong-headed. I am very independent of whether or not that was kind of portrayed in the season. If I watched the episodes, I could tell you, but I've only watched
it. Was not. I have lots of questions about your edit.
Yes, but I think I was not a big fan of CK pretty early on just because I'm not one of those people who can take orders, say yes sir, and go with it. And I felt like in our conversations that I was simply there at the table. I didn't necessarily have a say. While he was kind of having the conversation as if we did, it was like, really, at the end of the day, I did not. And it was more of a game of manipulation to see of like, for me to get to where he wanted to go. Where it seems like, all right, you came to that conclusion, I just kind of helped you get there type thing. And that didn't float well with me.
Yeah, it seems like from what we saw in the edit that the first few times that you have to go to tribal, like the first time, it was just kind of like, we can just save Lily for later. We'll just take out, what's that girl's name? Rachel? Was that her name?
Yes.
Sorry, Rachel. Yeah, it seemed like it was just kind of like, we'll just take out Rachel. And then the second vote happens for Jacob. That's his name, right? Jacob?
Yes.
It seems like so long ago. Where it's like, oh, well, Jacob and Sophie have this connection, so I guess we can just save Lily for next time. Like, It seemed like that was kind of a recurring thing for you at every tribal. And then we get into the swap, quote unquote swap. And it's like, well, we could just do Lily again. Oh, all of a sudden this new target has emerged, so we'll just save Lily for next time. And it seemed like you were always we'll just get her next time vote. Yeah. And then by the time you step up and start like being like, maybe I should flip on these people, then the other side idles you out.
Yes, and that was one thing. So again, there was something else that they didn't show that I was I don't know if we just didn't film it and that's just how it came out, but the one swap to where Kalahari threw that challenge, that was my idea. Because I was like, mathematically, nobody else wants to work with us. And so if we all throw it, and there's going to be, I think it was 7 on the bottom, I was like, and we have 4? Those numbers alone seem pretty good. And so I think CK probably took credit for that along the way at some point. But
yep, he did.
Mathematically along the way, I was like, this works in our favor if we do this. And so again, I don't know if that initial conversation wasn't caught. I don't think it was, but then still, that was never something that I took credit for, but that was kind of my idea along the way. But yeah, so it wasn't like I was entirely like a goat being dragged along.
Right.
But I was too afraid to make a move because CK seemed like such a threat that everybody loved. Like, from my perspective, I'm like, all right, everybody on my tribe seems to love CK. So if I all of a sudden turn around and be like, let's get this guy out, they're going to be like, all right, your time, let's go. And that was hard, of just thinking this guy is really liked and everybody loves him. And while he's a great player, I don't think between the two of us, they're going to keep me over this guy who's really talking to all the tribes and kind of helping everything fall in place. So.
That's an interesting point, because I feel like a couple times, at least during the pre-merge, you were edited at least in like a swing vote type of way of like, I don't know where I'm going. Like, I could do this, I could do that. And like, it seemed like you were running through scenarios and the opportunity to flip was always there. You were just never taking advantage of that. So it makes sense because, having CK on, he kind of explained his game and like how how intricate it was and everything. So hearing your perspective of what the edit wasn't allowed to show it does elevate your game from what has been displayed thus far. And so I guess I do have a question. Were you approached at all for going after CK in that CK Delaney split? Or
that was my question.
Which
that's
presented?
Yes. And I think the other thing I should also mention is I was a nursing major, so there were certain things of where I was constrained based on time. I had clinicals, I had class, and I had tests on top of all of these things. So I was trying to play the hardest game I could play while also not sacrificing what I was doing academically. But that split, I was approached to the CK Delaney. And I struggled with that vote the hardest because Melanie and I we were talking constantly that week because we were deciding which way to go. Of just one, I was like, we can go get Delaney, huge player. We can go get CK, huge player. And that week, you're referring to the week that sent CK home, correct?
Yes.
So that week, I thought I had this perfect, like, once again, I thought I had a great plan and didn't pan out. To where I had really bonded with Victoria and all of them the week before, because that was the week I was on my own, kind of figuring everything out. And I thought, I was like, all right, I'm kind of in with them. And I was going to see if they could split the votes, because again, they would think if I'm not with Kalahari in that group, they're down in numbers. So if we split the votes and one of them has a idol per se, we can get one of them out. And then Melian and I would go and vote Delaney out. I think it was Delaney. No, that was not that week. Was that week?
The week CK went out, Delaney got the other votes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, they all kind of mushed together because it was 2 years ago.
Right.
Yes. So Melly and I were talking constantly that week, and we were deciding which way to go. And I really struggled. And what came down to it was, Hallie was my kryptonite. I could not go against Hallie, and flipping on Kalahari meant for me flipping on Hallie.
And you don't think Hallie would have ever flipped with you?
No, she never would. And I know if I had stayed in one more week, I was fully planning on going with Victoria and the rest of them, because I knew my path to the end would not have included the Kalahari remnant that was left. And so that vote, I probably made the move that kind of sealed the nails in the coffin by staying, and CK ended up going home, which was the first time I was on the wrong side of the vote. And that hurt so bad. Knowing that I was on the wrong side stung, but I also was relieved at the same time that this guy who I had wanted out for weeks was gone. But at the same time, it sucks that I was on the wrong side of the vote as a result.
Right.
But yeah, no, now looking back, I was like, all right, that was a mistake.
I disagree. I don't think it was a mistake. I think you staying loyal to that side is actually great, because they take CK out and then Chadwick flips back and you guys have numbers again.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was your mistake. I think we're getting to the mistake, maybe, that I noticed.
Yeah. I think there was so many times where I think if I had been the flipper, it would have ended my game way sooner than it did. I think loyalty was a huge part of my game, but I think loyalty is what led to me getting voted out or getting idled out in the end. So it's really looking back of like, where was the point that I could have flipped to actually sustain my game?
I think that's always a question, especially in the position that you were in throughout the majority of the game. And that's not something, it's something circumstantial, somebody that doesn't have the amount of time that some of these like freshman, sophomore players are able to put into, or if you are, obsessed with the game and have time to do hour to 2 hour confessionals like Jai would be able to put into this game. I think Ellie actually also had a pretty similar experience with her nursing school, if I remember correctly, saying, I didn't realize how competitive it was until like it was too late. And, I was 2 weeks behind competitive wise. So that's definitely a learning experience, I feel, not just for Survivor LU, but again, for the entire like college community of, these Survivor live games. So I think the circumstantial from outside looking in, someone who has, just only watched what you guys have been able to present, I think that you were just forced into like this flip position. It was pretty evident from the edit that you were on the bottom of your tribe, mostly because CK was just very evidently at the top. And I think you played it to the best of your ability. And not to mention, I think you would have been able to navigate it had you not gone online, because those conversations, from experience, I played some of these orgs and like online games, those conversations about, flipping or moving forward and creating plans together, they're a lot more genuine when you're face to face and with somebody, and it's a lot more easier to lie when you're on, FaceTime or something. So that could have definitely played a detriment. So that leads into my next question that we kind of touched on Austin last week. How drastic was that change from in person to online for you, and how did it affect your game?
It was kind of a complete 180. Just the structure was completely different. But also the time in between. I don't know if Austin mentioned it, but there was over a month that we weren't doing anything Survivor related.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was not only figuring out what in the world's going on, like, in the world, but also, like, how are we doing school? How are we just when I was like, we knew I think part of us were like, we're never actually gonna finish this season. Of like, we didn't think there was a way, but we were also just trying to figure out our lives in this pandemic. Right. And so as a result, Delaney, Victoria, and we would have pretty much weekly movie nights over Netflix Party, and so we got really close. And then starting the game again, it's like, I have developed these really close friendships, but I have hardly spoken to Kalahari. Like, I think Hallie and I would talk, but like the rest of these people, I'm like, all right, these tight alliance, I haven't really spoken to. And so that was kind of a moral dilemma. I'm like, do I go against these friends that I've now become really close with? Or do I stick with the people that I was loyal with in the game? And then also with each of these weeks, so to say, they were about 30 minutes in between tribals. So we would have a challenge, and then I think 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'd have a tribal, and then we would do 3 tribals in one night. And so it was back to back to back. And so really what would have happened if you had a week to kind of, even if it was online or anything like that, if you had a week to kind of discuss it and work through it, outcomes probably would have been very different than the 20 minutes that we were given. And not that I blame any of production, because they were kind of working with very little time, because I think we started up at the end of April. So it's like you wanted to really kind of churn through these to finish up, so that way we'd actually have a season, but also not kind of sacrifice the game too much. So with what they had, they did a good job, but I think the game changed a lot as a result.
Right.
That's interesting. Yeah. Austin mentioned that he really didn't, he didn't provide a lot of insight, mostly because he only lasted one round of that, online game. So that is a really interesting insight, especially that bit about you having those movie nights with the opposing alliance, with the enemies, so to speak, with the villains of the season. So
yes,
that some
and I think
people
allegedly
in those movie nights sometimes too. So
allegedly the villains.
So what is your perspective of that? Because if you said you haven't been really watching the season, and I guess we can fill it in a little bit, some of the people in your alliance on the other side mentioned that the other side was more villainous, more bad, more playing.
Let's simplify it. There's 2 alliances right now.
Yes.
There are the good guys and the bad guys. In your opinion, which side is the good guys?
I think Kalahari's looked at as the rebels. Of like, we were supposed to be gone a while ago. And so we're just kind of throwing things together. I think CK easily could have been labeled a villain. And kind of any group that worked with him easily could have also been a villain. And though I think it's also about perspective. I think I could see my side as like, all right, we were kind of the rebels, kind of holding on of, should have just kind of a random assortment of people working together, hoping that one of us wins. And the other side seems a little bit more organized, a little bit more like collected, if that makes sense. Of they were playing the game, but it was very methodical almost.
Mm.
And I think after CK got out, we lost our methodical player, and we were just kind of like throwing things together of like, all right, we got to play this game somehow. And so I don't know, that's kind of my perspective, but
Sure.
I think if you were on the other side, you could easily kind of turn it around.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing because we asked Austin last week what his opinion was, and he was pretty gung-ho on the fact that you guys were not his favorite people. And it was an interesting dynamic because watching it, I viewed your side. This was from my point of view. I viewed your side as being more of the, dominant alliance in the fact, just strictly probably because CK was the head of it for so long, and him playing a little bit more villainous from what the edit portrayed did kind of, not help your case at all. So having on the other side, it felt more of like a ragtag group of like people with idols coming together. So it's a really interesting perspective because CK explained his side pretty well on what he thought was going on. So I always want to kind of get your side of the story because at the end you also didn't really get a lot of screen time to explain what your gameplay was overall. So I do have a question, also just a broad one for you on kind of your experience. So you kind of mentioned being a fan of Survivor and how Ellie was telling you about it and you got hooked on that. But we also see in Survivor LU especially, some of these people have never seen the show before. Austin, for one, thought an immunity item was what you call idols and stuff like that. So
Jacob had never seen it. Hallie had never seen it. Yeah.
So what was it like kind of navigating that as like a fan of Survivor? How would you label yourself, I guess, first of all? And what was it like navigating this game compared to what you maybe expected?
So I would label myself as a fan of Survivor. I would not label myself as a super fan of Survivor. I'm not one of those people who's seen every single episode of every single season, has studied every single player and their strategies and all those things. That is not me. But my mom watched the game like every single week growing up. And I remember 5-year-old me who should have been going to bed, but would sneak downstairs so I could get a little glimpse of Survivor because I was like, this game seems cool. And then eventually growing up and watching the game. And I enjoy watching the game. I love seeing the competitive nature, but also the social aspect of it too. How it's not the challenge beasts that win the game all the time. It's also about sometimes the player that you would have labeled the weak one wins.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have seen the game. I've watched, I don't know how many seasons, but quite a few. Because I think I started watching it in middle school and I've seen every season since. But so I would label myself a fan of the game. So it's not like I went in clueless. I may have looked clueless sometimes, but I was not. So
did you find yourself kind of gravitating towards people who've seen the game before, or did it really not matter for you on like who to work with and who not to?
At the end of the day, I don't think it really mattered. I think whether you've seen the game or not, we were still kind of on an even playing field. It wasn't, I think, for me, John was a big threat day one. Walking in, saying, oh, I've seen everything. I'm like, all right, that just seems really dumb to say out loud. I think he's a great guy, but I was like, dumb. All right, my friend, I know you're good, like, at the game. You know everything, but not the brightest move. But I think at the end of the day, slates were kind of wiped clean. You really still had to work with people no matter what. You really still had to be able to pull your weight within a tribe. You really still had to be able to compete. And whether or not you've seen the game or not is not going to change how you perform in challenges. And so for me, that really wasn't a factor. Because like Jacob and I, we had, like, until he was voted out, I think it was at least 2, maybe 3 times of we met up in like the same spot at Liberty and we talked. And my favorite conversation was the conversation that lasted an hour that neither of us basically said anything. It's probably the funniest thing of just like, I don't know, like back and forth for an hour. And so I think at the end of the day, it didn't really matter whether or not you've seen the game.
Yeah. Okay, let's move forward to your downfall. And I maintain that you being voted out is not entirely your fault. So from what we see, the edit shows that you're saying, okay, I could flip here because I want to start, being the one making moves, which I do think your timing was pretty good. Final 9, final 8, final 7 is the time where you want to step forward and start doing things. The only thing that I think you might have done wrong here is not sitting down the other side, unless you did and it just wasn't shown, and sitting down, Sophie, Victoria, and Ethan and being like, listen, I have to vote with them for this one vote, but after this, like, I'm with you. Or even saying like, hey, this vote, I'm with you, just to get them off of your name. So what we see is you being like, yeah, I want to work with you guys. Cool. And then you get idled out, of course, which I have, if and when we get to talk to Sophie, Victoria, and Ethan, I have a lot to say to them about this move because I think it was a very not smart move on their part. I was telling Dom before we started, like, oh, Delaney's gone, so all of a sudden this side can't pull together a smart plan. But I don't know. What were your thoughts on that? Not even week, I guess, that time in the game, the round that you went out.
10 minutes.
Yeah, what we saw basically was you being like, hey guys, I want to work with you in the future. And then being like, okay, but let's not do that.
Yeah, and I think for that vote, basically I was a casualty as a result of time. I think if we had actually had a week to discuss, I think maybe, or even like a couple hours, I think things would have been very different than the 15, 20 minutes that we had. Because I remember with reaching out to Victoria, be like, hey, I really want to work with you after this vote. Like, I have to stay with this vote, but after this, like, we're it. Was like 2 or 3 minutes before tribal. I think that because that was our last tribal of the night of the 3, because we had I think Austin was first, then Delaney, then me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was the last one of the night, and so it was getting pretty late, and everybody's like, all right, we got to get through this. And so it was 2 minutes before that I had texted Victoria and be like, hey, like, after this vote, we're in it. But before that, it was just like this mad scramble. So there really wasn't an opportunity to reach out to anybody besides her to really say, hey, I want to like move forward with you. Because besides that, it was like mad scramble of like, all right, you're in this conversation, you're in this FaceTime, and then you're jumping over here, you're in this FaceTime. So there wasn't really any kind of method to the madness. It was just kind of chaos trying to throw everything together.
So in your mind, just from your perspective, if you guys pull off this vote and Sophie doesn't have an idol, Sophie goes out, and then it's Ethan and Victoria versus what, the 6 of you. It would have been Idris, Chadwick, you, Jai, Hallie, and Melanie. So it would have been a 6-on-2. So if you flip after that vote, after taking Sophie out, it's still a 5-on-3. So what was your plan moving forward?
So the door with Melanie and I was never really shut. I think there was always at least some kind of conversation there. So I think that easily could have been a number of like working with her. And since she was kind of on the bottom of that group anyway, she remained loyal but was still kind of on the bottom, wasn't necessarily a power player in that number. While she was working with Kalahari, at some point it was still like she was on the bottom. So I think it was kind of, our numbers would have been pulling the people who weren't really considered numbers together, of like they were numbers but they weren't necessarily like people with a say. Right. And so I think I probably would have pulled in Melanie. So that would have been 4.
4-4 at that point. Yeah.
And then I think Hallie would have come with me.
You think Hallie would have flipped on one of Chadwick, Jai, or Idris?
Because she was not close with Jai or Chadwick.
Okay. Sure.
And we were really close. I don't think Hallie would have flipped on CK, but Hallie and I were really close to the point of where I might have been able to have a conversation to see if she would have come with me. So I don't know how that would like what that would have looked like, because I never got to see what that would have looked like. But I would have been very curious, because I think things would have gotten really interesting if I had survived one more tribal.
Well, it was really sad to see you go, especially right as you were picking up steam. Dom, do you have any more questions about Lily's game before we move a little forward?
Don't. I think you've shed a lot of light on situations, because you were kind of under-edited compared to a lot of people on the season. And you kind of explained that just, being in your academic situation. But again, I think it's also because CK was on your tribe and took up the majority of the Kalahari content. So
yeah. And then when he was gone, we had Jai, who had 2-hour-long confessionals. So it's like,
I do have another question about the game, actually. So that awkward standoff where everybody was just super tense, I think it was right after CK got voted off. What was that like in real time for you?
Very awkward. Because the previous vote, I was with Victoria, Sophie, and a couple other people. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a conversation with that whole group an hour before Tribal, saying, I'm in it. I'm with you guys. Let's go vote CK out. Let's go. And then it was very awkward. It was very silent. And then I forget who turned to me. It was like, you voted for Delaney, didn't you? And because I just wasn't saying anything. I was just there this is unfortunate. And so one of them turned to me, and I think I just shook my head. I didn't offer any explanation. I was just like, yep, that's what I did. I was hoping nobody was going to ask me and I'd be able to lie slightly through it, but it was very awkward for everybody. So
it was a great scene.
It's my favorite scene probably from LU. It's just so good.
It's up there. I think I have one higher than it, but it's up there. You guys put on a great show. Lily, thank you for shedding light on everything that we have not seen and behind the scenes. And also, you were the first one that kind of told us and let us know as viewers what that whole setup was like for switching on to online. And that gives us a lot more understanding, I feel like, viewing these next couple episodes and understanding what really went down. I do think we would see a much different season if you guys had more time to play. But again, it's a piece of history that no one knew what was going on, whether it be in the world or for Survivor. So it's just great to have the episodes right now. But Drew, do we want to do our ranking this week?
Yeah, let's do our Player of the Week points.
We're going to group up episode 8 and 9, which is probably the best thing that we can do, because apparently 8 and 9 took place 10 minutes apart.
I have not thought about this at all, to be honest.
I have not either, but I can throw out my 1 point this week.
Okay, go for it.
I think my 1 point this week, I guess I'm going to go for Hallie. I think Hallie, we didn't really see a lot of content from her, but it seems like she is, again, on top of things. From what Lily has said, she had a close relationship with her, so that's at least, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that may be one vote on the jury. So that's definitely a positive. And, she hasn't even been discussed yet. They went for Lily, who was a potential swing vote, over Hallie, who, probably wouldn't vote with them ever. So that, I think, is a pretty good move for her, regardless if it was intentional or not.
Mm-hmm. At this point, I mean, we have to start looking forward. Of course, we look at what was done in the episodes, but we have to start looking forward at who can win. I thought about giving Hallie my 1 point. I just don't know that she can win. I'm going to give Chadwick my 1 point, because I think he's in a good position where he's in the numbers. he's not at the bottom of the numbers in that majority, but he's also not the target. So I'll give my 1 to Chadwick. I don't know. I truly have no idea. I'm going to give my 2 points to Sophie because she idled someone out, but she's still not in the majority, so I can't justify giving her 3 points. I think she's positioned okay. I mean, within the triangle of Sophie, Ethan, and Victoria, it doesn't seem like any of the 3 of them at any point were like the tight 3 because Delaney was kind of the glue in that alliance. So, I mean, props to Sophie for playing an idol correctly and saving herself, but I just don't see her route to get to the end, which is very sad to me. But if Sophie makes it to the end, she wins, I think. I genuinely think Sophie beats anybody else who makes it to the end if she makes it to the end with them at this point. I just don't see her getting there, which is why I'm giving her my 2 points. Dom, where are your 2 points going?
I will also be giving my 2 points to Sophie. I think she has played a really good game up to this point. That idol play was definitely props to her. I do think it may put more of a target on her, but again, it 100% depends on what the other alliance is gonna, who they view as a threat. And between Sophie, Victoria, and Ethan, I think, it's kind of like a dice roll on who. Because I honestly think all 3 of them are playing better games than the majority.
I agree. But the other thing is the 3 of them could just be sniped out the next 3 votes.
Exactly. So that's why Sophie is only getting my 2. I do think it was a very dumb move to go for Lily, but to each their own. We were.
I think that's a massive flaw, and I can't wait to talk about it with them.
Yep. So and then I can just jump right into my 3.
Yeah, go for it.
So I do want to give an honorable mention for 4, for 4th place on my top roster. I do want to give a shout out to Ethan because Ethan was, able to, he's got 2 immunity wins. He was able to get Delaney out over him, and Sophie was the target at this most recent one. So whatever Ethan is doing is working, and I think he has the most impressive resume on paper thus far to be able to do it. Although I do think Ethan has been more of an emotional player, and I don't know if he has the potential to make it far. We just haven't really seen him come out of a shell, but I do want to give the quick note that he has been able to achieve some things in these last 2 episodes that really have not been brought to light by the edit or, at Tribal Council. And I just wanted to give him a shout out. So if we're counting half points, he can have my half point.
I have a question for Lily about Ethan while we're talking about Ethan. Ethan has an impressive resume, but he's in the minority. He's not being targeted, even though he should be targeted. And even through the pre-merge, he's out there. He's very visible. People see him. I'm just wondering, Lily, from your perspective, having, connections in both alliances and having been in the other alliance, at this point in the game, why is Ethan not a target? Is it because people are like, oh, he's kind of abrasive, which he is. He's a little bit abrasive. Is it because, oh, he's abrasive, so we can take him to the end and beat him because people won't like him? Is it he's not good at challenges, which is not true because he's won 2 immunities? I'm just confused. Why are people not targeting Ethan?
I think for him, he always had somebody in front of him. There was always, if he didn't have he either had immunity or there was somebody else left in the game that we all saw as somebody who needed to go first. But I also think Ethan's having conversations that aren't being shown.
Okay.
None of those conversations occurred with me. I never had one single conversation with Ethan, but I know that there are certain conversations that are occurring that are not necessarily being shown. That could be part of why he is staying into the game up to this point over what seems like an obvious boot.
Interesting.
So
if we saw those conversations, I might have him up higher on my list then. So we thank you for that insight. I will be watching him closely these next couple episodes. So I guess I can go into my 3rd or
Yeah, go for it.
Points.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't think. I just felt really good about this person after this episode. I think they had a really strong presence, whether they were controlling things or not. I really liked their energy, and I'm going to give my 3 points to Idris. I think he very much, took control, said like, yeah, they might come for me. I feel like I'm in the best position, and I feel like he's owning it and still playing the game in a strong, commanding way. And I really do respect that. And out of everybody on the Kalahari side, I feel like he would be able to explain his game the best. I think he might have I feel like him and Hallie have the strongest games thus far on that side. But I feel like he may be able to explain it that much better than her. So out of everybody, I want to give my 3 points to him because he's bringing a lot of energy, at least TV wise as well, just, being online and virtual and everything. So I want to give appreciation to his game as well as his TV presence as well.
Mm-hmm. I thought you were going to say something.
You cut out. And Drew will also be giving his 3 points to TVD. Drew.
Am I back?
Yeah, there you are. You left us on a cliffhanger.
I don't know.
You just lost a viewer.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to give your points to somebody else, and I was going to be very concerned when you started on your talk about liking their prep. I thought you were going to give them to Victoria. I like Victoria. I was just going to be concerned if you gave her your 3 points. I'm also giving mine to Idris. I honestly considered giving them to Hallie again, but I talked myself out of it because, like I said, I don't know that Hallie can win. So I'm going Idris. That's pretty solid. I think it's pretty obvious for me who is most likely to win and least likely to win, and that middle area is kind of jumbled up. So I think if the people on the bottom and the people on the top get taken out, we're going to have a very interesting game moving forward. I hope it's not just, taking out Victoria, Ethan, Sophie back to back in whatever order. If that does happen, I think either way, it'll be an interesting finale. So
I think we do have quite the finale coming up. We are kind of hitting our final stretch. Episode 10 is out. It came out last Saturday. So Drew and I will be recapping that eventually once we get the time to watch it. I feel like we are behind.
That is an episode I did watch. So
you did watch that one.
I did.
You're ahead of the ball game from us. So if you want to actually host the next one, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah.
But yes, so everybody who's watching, episode 10 will be on our agenda, as well as episode 11, which will be coming out this Saturday at 8 p.m., I believe. And if there is any change in that, be sure to be following Survivor LU's social media and subscribe to their YouTube channel, as well as smash that subscribe button for Live Reality Games Podcast. We are here every week or so if we don't, get busy recapping Survivor.
But there are plenty of other things going on Live Reality Games.
Exactly. That's what I was leading into. If you miss me and Drew, there's something on LRG podcast for you to check out. So Lily, final send off. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was so good to get that insight. Definitely, I don't want to necessarily say you were a purple edited player, but you were under the radar for sure. And it was really good to kind of get that insight and seeing where your head was at for a lot of those moves, because your stock definitely rose from what I was able to see throughout the season. So thanks for coming on and explaining everything 2 years later. So I'm sure it's
Lily, without spoiling anything, what do we have to look forward to moving into future episodes?
I think there's a very interesting dynamic going forward because you've kind of lost your game makers. You've CK, I would label as a game maker. Delaney, again, is a game maker. You've lost those two big people. So it's kind of figuring out what's left in this game to kind of move forward. And especially after an idle play, I think that can easily be shaking things up. And so I think the dynamic gets very interesting. I will say the jury group chats get very interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna mention jury. We have to start looking at who can win juror votes, individual juror votes now moving forward. So that'll be really fun. I'm excited to see you on jury, hear your final speech, your final questions.
I'm proud of that speech, I will say.
Oh,
I worked hard for it.
That is confident. I'm ready for the finale.
I'm excited. Yeah.
That was
I'm actually sitting in this very chair giving the speech. So something's never...
Well, we're excited to see what happens moving forward with the season. Dom, before we close out, anything else you have to say?
That's all from me. But yeah, Drew, thanks for joining me as always. We should be going by next week. We will coordinate times. But yeah, Drew, you want to sign us off?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and watching Live Reality Games, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, etc. Lily, of course, thank you for joining us again. Dom, I'll see you next week, I guess. Peace out, everybody.
Bye, guys.